just trying to keep our heads above water when it comes to the EOD and the standards. Questions?
Did you want Dan to do his little?
Did you want to go now, Dan?
Sure, doesn't matter.
Okay.
Just talk about what we do at the MAC table, Municipal Accessibility Advisory Table. There are 7 consumer members at that table, Noella and Andrew, but we have to introduce him every time he ever shows up.
Wow. You're going to get trouble for sure.
Turn off this mic.
No, but, and Catherine and Glenn Thurston with maintenance, Catherine with transit. Right off the get-go, Catherine and transit are so proactive towards accessibility. Guaranteed Timmins Transit is second to none in this province for awareness and everything to make it more accommodating for all persons, all disabilities to get on transit. So, and the proactiveness of the city for buying these low-floor, expensive buses. So that's real good stuff. Now, with MAC, we do site review audits, or audits of places like the McIntyre Arena. We did a lot of work there with Norm Beaudry. A lot of that accessibility is as a result of these audits that we've done. And I know dollars sometimes get in the way, so if it's simple things, it gets done immediately. We've also, helped out with the IT department, as Dave mentioned, and we as MAC, as consumers, like, we have doctorates in our own disabilities, so, and we're not covering them all by any means with only 7. We're there to help, like, for anything from the accessibility plan to any department, like with Catherine. She's resourced us a lot in different issues and policies. So, like, we're mandated by the government to be here, and we are advisory to the municipality. It's the municipality that has to have these committees. So anything we deal with is under the jurisdiction of the city also. We've done work at the Timmins Airport. A couple times we've been out there, accessibility issues again. It's a gray area because it's federal, provincial, and municipal out there. So we make suggestions, and federally they're sort of dictated as to the way they do things. There's a really important issue with that screening area at the airport. Just the fact that people have to lift suitcases up to the top. Those that fly know what I'm talking about. That shouldn't be there. That should be behind the counter. Therefore, you're never lifting the bag higher than the weigh scales, that type of thing. Like, these are issues we get into as MAC. We also do site review plans of the new buildings in town, like the DSABs, the Timmins Police Building, the hotels that are going up, Boston Pizza. But as a committee, we review the plans. The planning gets them before they give the okay for the building to start. We review these plans, but as a committee, we can only review the outside of the buildings. Amount of accessible parking spots, curb cuts, line of travel, like clear path of travel to get to the building, signage, things like that. We have input there. Inside the building is under the jurisdiction of the Ontario Building Code. So we can give suggestions, and a lot of our suggestions would be better than what's in the code, but when this built environment standard becomes law, the building code will have to change. It'll have to be in compliance with the standard. There's no doubt about it. So we do things like that. We also, like, as a committee, there's certain, like, people come up to me sometimes and say they've had some certain issue, manhole sticking up out of the sidewalk. So I'll just bring that to the table, and then Dave will get hold of maybe Public Works, and all of a sudden it gets rectified. No big deal, not a big expense. The one in South End there last year, that was quite an expense though. I think Luke knows that one. But, if someone has a real issue, a person with a disability in the community, and they don't know where to go, and it has to do with within the jurisdiction of the municipality, they can come to us, and if we can't sort of give them an answer over a phone conversation, if they called Dave or any member at the table, we could ask them to come and do a presentation. Over the years sitting at the table, we've had quite a few presentations from CRTC, the pool, handy transit issues. We're also part of the handy transit review committee and any issues that happen there. Where I'm going here, if people have a real pressing issue of accessibility, they can come and do a presentation at our table. And we'll try and resource, we'll try and get it solved. An example of that was Constable Paul Colby. He came to our table last year. We became aware about, in a power outage trip situation, the traffic lights in this town, east-west travel goes to yellow flashing, north-south flow goes to red flashing. That's not accessible for pedestrians whatsoever, because that east-west doesn't really have to stop legally. So up till now, it's been an issue about vehicles, inconveniencing them sort of thing. Well, it's got to go to all the way red flashing, because pedestrians must have the right of way. And therefore, when it's red flashing, it's a stop. It's a four-way stop. Everybody knows that. There's no confusion. So that's an ongoing issue. Another one we had was like the Jim Morris, where there's no controlled crossing in such a long stretch in a residential area, plus the institutions in that area. Like, under this AODA, pedestrians get right of way, and therefore these are pressing issues that must be addressed in a proactive, safe accessibility thought. Attitude has to change on that. So those are just examples of what we deal with. About accessible parking, it's not handicap parking. That's a derogatory term. In the act and everything, you'll never hear handicap. So it's accessible parking permit, and with that, we had a resolution passed through council a while back that any monies from the fines of people who park in these accessible parking spots goes into a separate account for MOC to utilize to bring down barriers within the community that we feel are very important, very pressing, with whatever monies we might have. So to this point, we purchased 2 sets of audible lights here at Cedar in Algonquin and at Burnett in Algonquin out of that fund. We do have some monies in there now building a bit. We're in contact with Tori Coolis at the pool. I know they need a lot of changes there, but there's no space to make the changes maybe necessary, but we're working with her on that, Dave is, and Glenn. So these are just a couple things that we do as a committee. And you know, like, barriers have been around since time began. We don't expect to change things like that. The plan of this AODA is to have a barrier-free province by 2025. That's a tall order, but every barrier that gets eliminated today, people with disabilities that come behind us, and there will always be that, won't realize that that was a barrier. So we just chip away at it a little bit at a time. It's like an iceberg, eh? 10% is above the water that we all see. 90% is below. So with all the other disabilities out there, we can't make the changes for everybody that's necessary. But if you chip away at it a bit here and a bit there, you'll get big chunks off that glacier, and eventually, or iceberg, you'll have that thing floating. And the next thing, it'll be like an ice cube in a drink of your choice. It'll be floating, and you know what happens to an ice cube on a drink of rum? So you'll get to enjoy it someday. So we're going to break down the barriers a little at a time. That's about it for now.
Thanks, Danny, and I do have a couple of questions, one from Counselor Skripnik.
Thank you very much, Dave. And I'm fully in favor, I think, as